Hey everyone, Howie Fisher from Fisher's Flies. Thanks for checking in. Today I am tying up a very simple articulated streamer pattern. I often get asked questions about articulated streamers. A lot of people think that they're intimidating, difficult, so on and so forth. So I wanted to make this video to try and simplify it. For the hook, I'm using an Ahrex XO 750, which is a universal stinger, size 14. This is the rear hook. For the thread, I'm using Veevus Power Thread, which is 140 denier in white. I'm going to go ahead and get started with my thread right behind the hook eye and take wraps back until it's secure and then snip the tag off. Once I've done that, I'm going to bring my thread back to the bend of the hook. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my first material, which here is fine black barred Marabou feathers in cream from Hareline Dubbin. Obviously use whatever Marabou you want or have. You don't have to use this one specifically. This is just a material that I happen to like because of the barring. I like to try and use the entire Marabou feather, so I'm going to prep this feather and pull fibers from the very bottom for the tail piece. I don't like to waste materials. I like to try and use the whole feather. So I'm going to go ahead and break off the tips of these feathers. The tips of these feathers are very, very fine. This specific Marabou is very fine, so I like the fluffier stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and just break those off and then tie this in. I'm going to make this tail about the length of this hook shank. This is the benefit of a articulated fly. One of the benefits is you get the length of the fly and the movement of the fly, but you get to make the tail section a little bit shorter so that you don't get a lot of short strikes, or you're less likely to get short strikes. For the body on this, I'm just using ice dub in Minnow belly. Again, I'm trying to make this fly as simple as possible. So I'm just going to use some dubbing here for the body. And I'm just going to create a simple dubbing noodle. This is going to be a pretty decently long and thick dubbing noodle. Don't be afraid to overdo it because we're going to brush this material out. You may have to add some more. If you don't put enough on, that's totally fine. Next, I'm just going to come in with my dubbing brush and brush out all of the fibers that I just created in this dubbing loop. And the reason why I'm doing that now is because I'm going to cord up my thread by spinning my bobbin counterclockwise, and then take large open spiral wraps to the front of the hook again. And all this is doing is cutting down on one more material you need to use for this fly. So I'm using the thread as a ribbing material. Once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and brush all these fibers out again. And the purpose of doing this is to try and create a little bit more of a fuller body, so when it's swimming in the water, it just looks more like a fish. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my Marabou again. I'm going to do the same process to prepare the fibers. I'm going to go ahead and lay this on top of my hook shank. So this fly is going to ride hook point down. And I'm going to go ahead and measure this. You want these sections to be overlapping so that when it's swimming in the water, these flies look like baitfish. So when it is in the water, these pieces of Marabou are going to slightly overlap to create a continuous body, if you will. So once I've got it where I want it, I'm just going to go ahead and build up a little head, make sure that everything is covered and secure, whip finish, and snip my thread off. And to make this fly even more durable, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of Solarez bone dry to the head of this fly. I would recommend adding some sort of head cement here. It's just going to really make, like I said, this fly last even longer, be more durable, especially if it gets in the mouth of some toothy fish. Next, I'm just going to cure this with my UV light, and then the back section of this is done. For the connection wire here, I'm using Beadalon in 0.015 inch. This can be found at pretty much any craft store, Michael's, Joann Fabric, so on and so forth. This is Kelly Gallup's preferred connection wire, and I have come to like it as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick this through the eye of the back hook, and I like to go ahead and crimp it a little bit with my fingers to make sure that it's where I want it to be. Next, I'm going to go ahead and add my front hook into the vise. So again, this is going to be the front hook of the fly. This is the same hook as the back, but in a size 10 instead of a 14. So you want the back hook to be slightly larger or sorry, you want the front hook to be slightly larger than the back hook. This will help with the swimming motion and also help when you finish the head. So pretty much for this front hook, I'm going to go ahead and replicate the back section with a few exceptions. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my 3D beads or connecting beads. I'm going to go ahead and slide them on over this wire that I've threaded through the back hook. And again, to demystify anything around streamers, you can really use any sort of bead that you want here. These beads are just accessible at fly stores, these Hareline ones, and designed specifically for this, but you really can use craft beads if you have those around, or they're more accessible than these 3D beads. They'll work just as well. So I'm going to go ahead and secure this. You want to secure this wire on the side of the hook shank. It'll just make it a little bit easier and will fish a little bit better in my experience. So I'm going to go ahead and tie this in just loosely and then add some super glue like you saw me do. Then I'm going to go ahead and fold this wire over. This is pretty important. I have heard stories from people of wire coming undone if they're casting larger flies or hitting them off rocks. So it's a simple step. It's pretty easy and quick, and it may, at the end of the day, just save your fly. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and cover up all that wire and the super glue, dab any off if you need to with a piece of paper towel. Again, I'd recommend this step, as when you come in with any other Marabou or materials, you run the risk of it getting stuck to any super glue. So just a suggestion. Next step, I'm going to bring in some more of this ice dub and minnow belly, and I'm just going to go ahead and take a loose pinch wrap over this. And really the main purpose of this is to try and again create a fluid transition or a single transition between the front hook and the back hook to make it look like one continuous fish. So all this is doing is really helping to cover the gap between the front hook and the back hook. And I'm going to do the same thing with the Marabou. So again, I'm grabbing the same type of Marabou as I've already used. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this in a couple sections actually. So I'm going to go ahead and break some fibers off. I'm going to line this up. Again, I want this section that I'm tying in to overlap the back section. So you can see here it's slightly overlapping the front section of the back hook. And I'm just going to go ahead and tie this in. Again, you can tie this in multiple sections if you want. You can do one on the far side and one on the near side if you want. You can do a larger chunk. You can do this section really in a number of different ways. So again, I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab this ice dub minnow and create a dubbing loop or dubbing noodle, just like I did on the back section of the hook, or the back section of this fly. And I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this backwards. Again, add a little extra if you need to, like I'm going to do right here. Again, repeat the same process. Come in and brush everything out. And I'm going to cord up my thread again by spinning it clockwise. Rib that body. And that's pretty much it. Again, for the front section of this fly, you're really just recreating the back section. My idea here was to, again, create a articulated fly that was as simple as possible for people trying to learn. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my next material. This here is just Arizona Diamond Dub. Any red dubbing or material will work here if you have red feathers, Marabou, whatever. All I'm doing here is just creating a sort of gill, if you will. So red obviously is a trigger point for trout and for other fish, because you see the gills or it looks like a bleeding bait fish, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this on what is the bottom of the hook. And this is just going to act like the gills or blood coming from this fish, and hopefully act as a trigger point for any fish that's looking at this fly. Lastly, I'm going to grab that Marabou again, which is the same Marabou that I've been using. I'm going to take a chunk off of the fly or the feather that I'm using, and I'm just going to repeat the same exact process. So I'm going to tie it on top, and I'm going to make sure that it's slightly overlapping the back section, or the section that's already tied in on this hook. So again, you can see here we're starting to create a pretty fluid singular fly or fish here. So if you look at it, it looks like one single bait fish here. And that's really the key with these Marabou sections, like I said. So next, or last, I'm going to grab some super glue, and this is what we're going to be using for the head. You can find this super glue at any fly store or Home Depot. It's just Loctite super glue gel. Next, I'm going to come in and grab my head, which is a FlyMen FishSkull. This is a weighted head, and I'm going to go ahead and shove it back on that super glue. And you want to let this cure for a few seconds to make sure it's not going anywhere. And while that's curing, you can come in, and this is a pretty important step actually. Take your thread and re-secure it to in front of the head. And all we're going to do here is build a thread dam. And this is just going to prevent the head from sliding off the front of the hook. Again, this is important because if that super glue does fail, which happens sometimes, this thread dam will, one, help it stay in place, but also prevent it from sliding off the front of the hook. And before this fly is completely finished, I'm going to go ahead and hit these thread wraps with some Solarez bone dry again. This will help it stay on or stay in place even more. Go ahead and cure it, and then I'm going to add these eyes on this head. If you like, and you're tying up a bunch of these, you can prep these eyes before putting them on here. So I'm just going to add a little tiny touch of super glue. You really don't want to add a ton here. You want to add just a dot. It'll be enough, I promise, to secure those eyes. So I'm going to take the eyes that are included with these packs, stick it on there. I like to use the end of my whip finish tool to push those down and help them stay in place. On this eye, I added a little too much of super glue, you can even see, and so I just wanted to get rid of that with a little paper towel. Going to do the same thing on the other side. Just go ahead and put that eye in place. Then I'm going to grab my Solarez bone dry again and just go ahead and coat these eyes with some of it. I would say this isn't necessary, 100% necessary, but it will make these eyes pretty much bulletproof. If you do just the super glue, these eyes can fall off and often do fall off. So if you don't want your eyes falling off, I would strongly recommend using some Solarez bone dry or another resin to just add another layer of durability to this fly. If that kind of thing doesn't bother you, just super glue them on and fish this fly. But again, just to make this even more durable, I'm going to go ahead and add some of this Solarez bone dry, and that's going to significantly reduce the risk of these eyes falling off as it's being fished, or even sometimes before they're fished. And this is pretty much it to this fly. So again, this articulated streamer is a lot of steps, but as far as complexity goes, it's pretty simple articulated streamer. And again, that was my intention. So tie them up, fish them. Let me know what you think.